My friends, the Switch 2 era is upon us. So, of course, that got me looking back at the Switch 1's library and trying to figure out what I felt were the best and worst games. We're going to be focusing on the worst ones today. Although I will have to say, most of the games on this list aren't terrible, just more disappointing than anything. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are bad games on the Switch, but I wanted to focus on Switch exclusives, which are mostly Nintendo first-party games and stuff like that. And there's not a ton of bad ones out there, just some that were kind of disappointing. Okay, so the only rule that I have on this list is it has to be Switch exclusive, so no ports and no multi-platform games. And also, just keep in mind, this is my own opinion. So, with that out of the way, let's get started with a game that is not bad, but definitely disappointing. Princess Peach Showtime. Like every game on this list, I wanted this to be good. Unfortunately, it just wasn't really. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad game. It's functional, it works, you can play through it, but in terms of its gameplay, I love the way the game looks. It is distinctly Peach, and I like that they made it so that it's very different from other Mario games, so it's like her game. But, I don't know, I think Nintendo made the wrong decision when it came to what they wanted this game to be. You see, Nintendo's always great at making games that are simple and easy, but everyone can enjoy. I don't care that this game is simple and easy, because most Nintendo games are, but most games are engaging. Like, if this is a Mario game, right? Technically, it's it's a spin-off of the Nintendo franchise. This is the same system that gave us Mario Odyssey and Mario Brothers Wonder. Now, it may be unfair to compare this to the others, some people would say, but I say it's not. I say it's completely fair. This is a Mario game, a Mario character that was being charged at full price. So I think it's reasonable to expect the same amount of quality. So what went wrong? So first of all, the demo scared a lot of people off, and it also raised a lot of red flags with me. But basically what the game boils down to is each level has a different costume that Peach has to don, and each costume has their own movesets and all that other stuff. And that's fine, although I really would have preferred that you could change each costume on the fly and solve puzzles and get through levels like that. That would have been way more engaging. But the problem is, the game never gets more difficult or complicated. Once you've played one level with every costume, you've played them all. Sure, the set pieces change, but it's the same thing. And it just got dull after a while. Like I said, the main problem with the game is engagement, not the fact that it's simple and easy. Because Mario Odyssey and Mario Wonder were simple and easy. I blew through those games just as quick as I blew through this game. But I was way more engaged while playing. The game mechanics were just way more fun. You had different power-ups that you could switch between. Stuff like that. This was just way too linear in one note to be very engaging. Unless you're a little kid, and that's fine, But like I said, Nintendo's bread and butter has always been making games that everyone can play. I'm glad that a lot of people did like this game, mostly kids and stuff, and that's great. But, as a fan of the character and a fan of Mario games in general, and video games in general, I prefer it when games are a bit more engaging. I have no problem with what they wanted to do, all these different costumes and they do different things. That's all perfectly fine. But, like I said, it just got way too boring, way too quick, because they just didn't up the difficulty. They didn't make it more interesting. And with each level only being one costume, you just knew what you were going to get before you even entered the level. How am I supposed to be full of wonder and interest if I know exactly what the level is going to be before I even go into it? That was my problem with it, really. And like I said, it's a shame because I want Peach to have more games, and I want, more characters to get the spotlight. But if they keep doing this, it's just, the game didn't sell very well, unfortunately. I think it just sold 1 point something million, which for a Mario game is not that impressive. It's not terrible, and it felt like this was a budget game, so it probably made its money back. But like I said, they're charging full price for this. And I think that's another thing that scared people away, is that you can't have a demo for a game that's so obviously very simple and then charge full price for it. And like I said, Nintendo games never go on sale, so you're probably always going to be looking at this as close to full price. So it just didn't work out. Maybe better luck next time. I don't know if there'll be a next time. Hopefully there will be, and they'll learn from this. But overall, like I said, not a bad game, but as a fan of the character, it was really disappointing. Next up, we have The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, I will say up front, this is the best game on the list. But it's still a little disappointing. Like, the reason it's so high on this list is because at the end of the day, it is still a really good game. It's just that it was a sequel to Breath of the Wild, and the $70 price tag did not help. So by the time this game came out, I had already played hundreds of hours of Breath of the Wild, and maybe I was a bit too burnt out on it to really pick up another big adventure like this. But I just wasn't having fun with this game. Like, it felt like more of the same, but not as fun. Like, I don't know, I didn't like the new powers as much. I didn't, I was playing the same map basically, with the depths and the sky not being enough to really make me want to explore, and there wasn't much in either of those places. So I felt like I was just exploring the same Hyrule, which I had already spent hundreds of hours in. It just didn't hit. Like, I've watched a lot of people talk about this game and how disappointing it was, and everyone had their own reasons, but my main reason was just, it wasn't fresh enough, it wasn't new enough. Like, Breath of the Wild had a lot of problems, but the fact that it was so new and so fresh and just fun masked a lot of its problems. That was all gone here. Like, the newness was gone, the freshness was gone, it was just not as fun. That's all I can say. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't as fun. And also a lot of people had a lot of problems with the story and the characters and all this stuff. I didn't really care that much, but yes, that is a downgrade. So yeah, I can see where people are coming from. It was just, for me personally, it just wasn't as fun. It was just disappointing, and like I said, the fact that I had to pay $70 for it, which is more than the first one, it really didn't feel like it deserved to be charging that much. But, for some people that was more, that was fine because they got hundreds of hours out of it or whatever. But I didn't get that much out of it, so it like I said, not much to say about this one. It just wasn't as fun as the other one. Again, a huge part of that may have been because I was just burnt out. But yeah, it was just disappointing. Alright, next up we have Nintendo Switch Sports. This is another game that's not bad, but was incredibly disappointing. So I really like the Wii Sports games. Whether it was the original Wii Sports or Wii Sports Resort, I still go back and play them and have a good time. So I was excited for this game. But I don't know what was going on with Nintendo this generation, but they really dropped the ball, no pun intended, on their sports games. Foreshadowing, by the way. Anyway, so the biggest problem with this game is its lack of content, which is a big problem with Nintendo and their sports games for some reason. So let's compare this to the old games. When this game came out, it had bowling, tennis, chambara, soccer, volleyball, and badminton. That's not a lot, considering how many sports we got with the original Wii Sports Resort, which had a lot more. And not only that, they were missing some very, staple sports. They eventually added golf and basketball, a year, and then, 2 years later. It took a long time for anything to get added to this game. And it was just two sports that should have been there to begin with. They weren't even new. So that was another problem, that there's not enough newness there. They cut a lot of stuff out and didn't give us anything new to replace it. Let's talk about the new sports for a minute. So first we had badminton, and that was just basically worse tennis. In my opinion, it was kind of boring, and it just, I don't know, I'd rather play tennis, so that was kind of a waste. Then we had volleyball, which was another boring game, because it was basically just a rhythm game, because it was all about timing and pretty much nothing else. And then you had soccer, which had the potential to be really fun, but it was very teammate dependent, and we'll get into the online in a minute. So it could be really fun. That was probably the only good new sport, I'd say, that they added. So let's talk about the sports they did add, like the returning sports. They work and everything, but they were missing so much content. Like Chambara, for example. Where was Speed Slice? Where was Showdown? Don't tell me that the Switch couldn't do what the Wii could do. There was just so much lacking content. Yeah, that was nice that they gave us, a shield sword and a double sword, whatever you want to call them. So there was new swords, which was great, but nothing to do with them besides duel. That was it. Come on. And same thing with bowling, where was the 100-pin challenge? I don't think it was in there. There was they had trick lanes, which was nice, but they were missing a lot of stuff that you could do in the previous games. Remember in the original Wii Sports, there was platinum medals you could go after? Nothing like that here. Also, a side note, a lot of people complained about the sports mates, but I actually don't mind them at all. I actually like them. And you can still play as your Mii, so I don't know what people were complaining about. So, anyway, yeah, let's talk about the online for a minute. So this game allowed you to unlock a lot of cosmetics, which thank goodness at least they didn't go the microtransaction route. That's one good thing I will say for them. So you had to unlock them by playing the sports. The problem is, not only was there so few sports to play, so it got very grindy and repetitive very quickly, it actually was quicker to lose games than to win games. Like, you could play a match against somebody and try to win and go many, many minutes and end up losing. But if you threw matches intentionally, you would get the games over really quickly and still get a lot of more points than if you actually won a game. And people caught on to this really quickly, myself included. So you got a lot of people online throwing games intentionally, which is why I said soccer was a problem, because you got a lot of people who would not play the game. Same thing would go for bowling. Bowling would actually get you a lot of points if you got really far. The problem is a lot of people would clearly just click on the game and then go AFK. So you would be waiting for them to take their shot, but they never would. So you would just wait for time to run out. It would take so freaking long. So it would still be more quick to go into like Chambara, badminton, or tennis and just intentionally throw. And that's what a lot of people did. So it became very unfun very quickly because this game is very, people dependent. You need people to play against and stuff like that. So if you were just wanting to unlock stuff, the best thing you could do is throw games. So yeah, they really should have made it so that you won more points for winning. Like, you could definitely win some points for losing because you don't want people to get nothing, but it was just way more effective just lose. You'd get more points per time if you just did that. So that was a huge problem. And then, like I said, it took a long time for them to put golf and basketball in. And in my opinion, these versions of golf and basketball were worse, especially basketball. For one, you couldn't control your teammate, so that stunk because, again, you got a lot of people throwing games. And even when I played with the computer, it felt like the computer was trying to throw the game. They were just so bad. And it was 2-on-2 instead of 3-on-3, so that was a downgrade. And golf just wasn't very fun. I was never that big of a fan of golf anyway. So, yeah. Again, 2 years after launch for that. So, yeah, Nintendo Switch Sports was just disappointing, and there was no reason for it to be this way. It all worked, and I liked the look of the game and everything like that, and it functioned really well, but what was the reasoning behind the lack of content? There was no excuse for that. The only thing I will give them that this was not a full-price game like Princess Peach Showtime, and it wasn't a $70 game like Tears of the Kingdom. But there are other games that did the exact same thing and were full price. And next up we have the Mario sports games. Yeah, pretty much the exact same problem with Nintendo Switch Sports, except these were full price. Which makes it even worse, which is why they're higher on the list. Now I'm putting up just golf here because it's the one I spent the most time with and also the one I found the most disappointing because it's my favorite. But you can also put Mario Tennis and Mario Strikers on here. All three of these games basically all had the same problem. Not enough content, very little content added after launch, and when compared to the ones that came before, they're just objectively worse. And I'm gonna focus on the golf one because I think the golf one in particular suffered from a really bad new gimmick. So in this game, one of the gimmicks was that you could run to the ball after you hit it. That's why it's called Super Rush. And you could knock people out of the way, you had different power-ups and stuff like that. But unfortunately, that really restricted the courses because you had to make sure that you could run through them. In previous games, like on the GameCube, for example, there's this course that was in the treetops, which was kind of cool. And you could never have that in this game unless there was like bridges or stuff because you had to be able to run to get to your ball. So it just really made the courses very bland and boring. And it wasn't that great of a gimmick to begin with. But also, the single-player mode was very short, not a lot of content, and they just didn't really add that much afterward. It just felt like a waste of time. And again, it was full price. You could get other games for cheaper prices, even back in the day, and it would just be a better experience, really. And the Mario Tennis had the same problem, not a lot of single-player content, and they had a little bit of a story mode, but you had to play it as Mario. It's like, I don't want to play as Mario. I play as Mario in the mainline games. I don't ever play Mario in the sports games. I want to play as other characters. Why did you restrict that? I don't know. It just kind of pointless. And then Strikers didn't even have any single player content. It barely had anything. It was easily the most bare bones of all of these. Yeah, I feel sorry for the Strikers fans. They really got screwed over more than anyone else. But all three of these games were incredibly disappointing. I'm not sure if I would go into the realm of bad, but we're definitely getting to that point where it's we're almost getting into bad territory simply because there was no excuse for it, and other games were just better. Yeah, it functions, it works, but there's no point to play them, really, when you have the old games. So, yeah, some people say they're bad. I'd say they're more disappointing than bad, but we are kind of getting into that territory. Okay, next up is Bayonetta 3. I kind of feel bad putting Bayo 3 on here because a lot of the stuff that went wrong with this game is not really its fault, at least in terms of my issues with it. Like, first off, there was that whole controversy with Bayonetta's voice actor and all that stuff, which really hurt the game's reputation before it even came out. And then more information came out, and it's like, but by that time the damage had been done. That was not great. And then one issue that I personally always have with the Bayonetta games, because I played all of them, is despite playing through Bayonetta 1 and 2, I don't remember anything about them. I remember having fun, but as terms of the story, characters, and enemies and all that stuff, for some reason, it doesn't stick with me. And Bayonetta 3 being probably, I don't want to say the most lackluster, but maybe with all the baggage and, not to mention the fact that there's so many great action games out there nowadays. Like, I can make so many videos about character action games and stuff like that are out right now, or action games in general, that are just so good and that I love so much more than the Bayonetta series, that Bayonetta as a series in general, not just this game, just fall into the background for me. It just doesn't do enough to really make me remember them very much. Now, is that the game's fault? In a way, it doesn't do anything to separate itself. And it's the third one in the series, so it's not like it changes a ton of things or anything. And they're just more exciting games and bigger games on the market. It's just one of those things, like I said, it's not its fault mostly. Just competition is steep. So the popular consensus does seem to be that this is the worst Bayonetta game. Like, the first two were better. I can't tell you if that's true because I don't remember anything about them. I think they're insanely similar, but I couldn't tell you because it's been so long since I played them and I don't remember anything. It's just, I'm not even sure if I would call this one, again, I don't think I would call it bad. It's just disappointing and unmemorable. It's more unmemorable than disappointing, I would think. And I don't know if Bayonetta's going to continue with everything with Platinum Games and, this one apparently not selling very well at all. And then there was that other game, that Cereza game, which sold really, really bad, but a lot of people said was actually really, really good. I've never played it. Apparently no one did because it sold incredibly poorly. But very few who did play it said it was amazing, even though it wasn't like an action game or anything like that, so it probably isn't for me. But, it just seems like the Bayonetta franchise cannot catch a break. So I feel bad, but like I said, I was struggling to put games on this list, and, I do think it is an issue that this game is unmemorable, and, though I should say this franchise is unmemorable for me. I guess also the sex appeal does nothing for me. I've said it before, I don't really care if a character's sexy or not, whatever. That doesn't make a game good or bad for me. It's just, I just don't remember anything about it. I'm repeating myself. I gotta move on. Anyone who's played these games, can you tell me why you like them? I don't know. I can't remember anything about them. Next up, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Ugh. Really, that's all I should have to say. Like, of all the unnecessarily bad games out there, and yes, I do consider these to be the first of objectively bad games on this list, it was the one that didn't need to happen the least. Like, the groundwork was already there. You had it. Like, Platinum was right there, and yet you do this? I don't have time to talk about everything wrong with this game. People have done plenty of videos about why these games are bad. I think it's pretty obvious why they're bad. Bad graphics, bad decision. It didn't even work when it came out. It didn't even have a title screen, at least not a functional one. It had to be patched in. There was so many ways to soft lock yourself. There was bugs, so many of them. It was clearly released way before it was ready. There was not much content added. There's a lack of Platinum content. Just so many things were wrong with this. And what really sucks is that people were waiting for these for a long time. Although personally, I don't know why they wanted Diamond and Pearl remakes. They should have just wanted a Platinum remake. But whatever, I digress. But yeah, I could see these games, these games' terribleness coming a mile away. Pretty much when it was first revealed, I was like, oh, this is not gonna be good. So I stayed away from them. Yes, I'm still putting these on the list even though I didn't play them. These are the only games on this list that I do not own. because I actually wisened up and realized this is going to be terrible. Pokemon wasn't doing very good at the time anyway, so I was like, yeah, I'm skipping these. But I still have no problem putting these on the list because even without playing them, I know they are terrible. I didn't need to play them to know that, and plus, everyone pretty much agrees that these are terrible. Even the people who do like these games will admit that Platinum was better. And when your original is better than the remake, there's a problem. Pokemon really struggled this generation, unfortunately. And while I'm not going to put every Pokemon game on the list, even though a lot of them were disappointing, I gotta end this list sometime. I can't put everything on there. Like, yeah, Sword and Shield were definitely disappointing, but at the very least, I had fun with those. Like, despite all their flaws and clearly being rushed and everything, at least I had fun with them. I doubt I would have had fun with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I'm not even that big of a Gen 4 fan in general, so I definitely wouldn't have liked these, considering how they were butchered. So yeah, And finally, we have the big one. The worst games on Switch, in my opinion, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. A lot of people consider Diamond and Pearl remakes to be worse because they had at least a groundwork to work off of, but I find this to be way more disappointing, because I actually saw some good in this, and there was some good things in it. There was nothing good about the remakes of Diamond and Pearl, but here, there actually was potential for this to be potentially one of the best Pokemon games ever, and they failed. The game just did not work when it came out. Like, say what you want about the jank of the old Pokemon games, they never crashed on me. I have never had a Pokemon game crash on me until this game, and it happened constantly. Yeah, sure, nowadays it doesn't crash very much at all, because they've had 2+ years of patches and all that stuff, but the fact that at launch it crashed so frequently that I actually lost count, that's inexcusable. And again, $60 games. Charging 2 different $60 games. Can Pokemon stop doing this? You already proved with Legends Arceus that you can release one game and have all the Pokemon in it and actually be good. Maybe if you focused on making one good game instead of 2 mediocre games, or in this case, very bad broken games, you could maybe have a better reputation, or something like that. So yeah, I've already talked at length about how much I hate Scarlet and Violet, and while it has gotten better after dozens and dozens of patches, it's still not at a good state. It still looks really bad, still runs really bad, and even with the Switch 2 saying it's going to improve the frame rate and all that stuff, it shouldn't have had to come to that. You shouldn't have to have a whole new console come out just to fix the frame rate and its performance. Like, that should have been standard. I think even Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and Sword and Shield run way better than this game. Yes, it was trying to be ambitious with being an open world, but it even did that terribly. I played a lot of open world games, and this is one of the worst open worlds I have ever played. Aside from the fact that it didn't properly work, there was just nothing in it. And it was linear. Unlike other open world games where there was at least, some flexibility with where you could go and what you could do, here you couldn't do that because nothing scaled. It was still a linear game in sheep's clothing. So yeah, I can't really give it that much credit because it really wasn't being that ambitious. It was still a linear game, despite what it would have you think. Yeah, like I said, I could go on for hours. I have gone on for hours about this. If you look at all the videos I've done for this game and stuff, I probably have talked for hours about it. It's, no secret. Everyone knows they're terrible. I know some people like them because there was a lot of potential. The characters and story were good for a Pokemon game, and all that stuff. And yeah, people had fun with it because it is Pokemon. But just because it's Pokemon doesn't mean we can't demand better. We have gotten better. Legends Arceus was really good. Spoilers for my favorite Switch games list. But it was really, really good, and I was hoping we could get more of that, and I hope Legends ZA brings that. But as far as the mainline games are concerned, they had just been going downhill in terms of quality. Like, I thought Sword and Shield was the bottom of the barrel, and then this came out, and the bar is now set in hell. I'll tell you what, if Gen 10, whatever, comes out, and it's worse than this, Pokemon is doomed. There's no way it could be worse than this, right? Like, the game would have to not turn on in order for it to be worse than this. But yeah, we'll wait and see. So yeah, those are my worst Switch games list. How about you leave a comment down below about what you thought was the worst Switch game, and I'll see you next time.